Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everybody taking advantage of the Castalia Library spring sale. And also sorry for those in Spain and Portugal who obviously are not participating. Hopefully they're all doing okay. The theme for tonight's stream is the lights went out. And, it's kind of a scary thing in that that's the theme of a lot of movies, whether they're, horror movies, environmental scare movies, etc., etc. One of the whole problems is the idea that the lights go. Western civilization possibly not in basis of theory. Very large, very significant, very centralized policies being established because somebody had a theory and they managed to talk everybody into believing it. Free trade is another example. Ricardo argued for free trade. Adam Smith argued for free trade. Those arguments got accepted and enshrined into policy in the 1980s. And now we're seeing we've seen the terrible results of that. And now with what we're seeing with the power thing in Western Europe, the whole theory is about green energy, renewable energy. And there's a lot of problems. We won't go into the specifics of it, but basically the problem is that unlike a power plant, which just runs and is fairly steady, most solar power and wind power is very unreliable. You get too much of it when it's at its peak. You get too little of it when it's at the trough. And that sets up an unbalanced system that is very, very difficult for the grid to manage. And it appears, we're not certain yet, but it does appear that that is the reason that the grid went down in Spain. And then because of the way that the European grid is interconnected, it looks like that's what took down Portugal and parts of France as well. So this is a real concern. And there's nothing wrong with, well, I shouldn't say there's nothing wrong. There's a lot of things wrong with wind power. There's some real arguments about whether it makes any sense to use wind power at all because of how expensive it is in energy terms to produce those wind fans, wind turbines. But it's understandable that people want to explore that. But the reality is that we're much better off using oil and coal like we have been. Coal may not be a renewable resource, but oil is. I know we've all been taught that there's a limited amount of oil in the world, and we're going to run out of squished dinosaurs. That it's organic material that was compressed and blah. That's total nonsense. That's not what oil is. Oil is something that is produced by the geothermic activity under the earth. That's why you see things happening like an oil well gets tapped out and then it becomes active again, 10, 20, 30 years later. That's not possible if it's just, like a pool of water. Once it's drained, it's dry. The oil is coming up from the ground. This is called what they call abiotic oil theory. The Russians know it's true. But for whatever reason, that knowledge has been, I wouldn't even say necessarily suppressed. They just seem to try to avoid talking about it and say, well, we need clean energy, But of course, like all things that the narrative pushes, there's misinformation, there's partial information, and they leave out important things that need to go into the equation to figure out whether it is, whether it's actually justified or not. Integrate the grid, they said. It will bring peace and efficiency, they said. Sam is not a fan. Yeah, and this is the fundamental problem with all centralized systems is that they don't have, they're just intrinsically more delicate than decentralized systems. And so whenever you see an argument for efficiency, you should always keep one hand on your wallet and the other one on your gun. Efficiency is almost never, ever worth the price. And, it does have some benefits, but typically the main benefits are the amount of control that it provides whoever is controlling the centralized power. But even if you completely ignore the desirability or undesirability of someone having control over it, the fact is that it's just much more vulnerable. It's a fundamental problem with global government, of course. When you've got a variety of sovereign nations, people have the ability to choose different ways to live. But the more that everything is ground down and, made the same and, centralized, there's no options. And so instead of various systems, various technologies, various engineering systems competing, and you just end up with one system that the theoreticians have advocated and often hasn't really even been tested at all. So I think that this is a somewhat worrisome time, not just because of all the martial activity taking place around the world. The people have been worried about the Middle East. I don't think anyone really saw the whole India-Pakistan border heating up the way that it has. Right now, it's a lot more likely that there will be a serious war between India and Pakistan than between Iran and anybody else, whether it's Israel, the US, whatever. So, obviously I'm not a big, go live in the wilderness and become a prepper. That's never been my thing. But I do think it's a good idea to make sure that you've got, a week's supply of food and water and all that, all that sort of thing. Generators are not bad. I have a pretty hefty solar thing that holds power for literally months at a time. And so I just got that out today and, topping it up. And just because, hey, if you're going to lose power, it might be useful to be able to have, 20 minutes of power a day for one thing or another. You never know. So, I'm not going to talk too long tonight because, as you can hear, my voice is still kind of shot. Um, just trying to. It's just no big deal, just a minor cold, but been trying to kick it now for about 5 days. Um, Probably would help if uh, I did stop lifting while I'm getting over it, but can't stop playing soccer. So um, tomorrow's a big game for Dorking, playoffs. So we need 3 wins in a row to get promoted. So keep your fingers crossed if you're a football fan, soccer fan. Um, then also here's I've got somewhat of a treat for you if you're watching this. Um, we actually have apparently, um, our counter on the books doesn't work very well because whenever somebody tries to order something, their credit card fails or they cancel the order, or whatever, it ticks the product anyhow. It claims that the product is now gone out of stock, even though nothing was ordered. And so I got an email from the lady who keeps track of this stuff, and she says that there are actually still 4 Heidis left. And so if you're watching this, you might want to go to the store right now, because what I'm going to do for the benefit of those of you who watch these streams is I'm going to find Heidi, and I'm going to reset the stock counter so that you can, if you're watching this and you want to get a copy of it, one of the very last ones that we have available. Heidi Library Edition, out of stock. No, it is not out of stock. We have 4. So anyhow, that has just been updated. So if you are inclined, you can go ahead and pick up a copy. Sam says all the refugees from said war, Pakistan, India, have Canada in their sights, I'm sure. Well, I imagine that some people are probably already heading that way. And of course, it's not going to solve anything. It's just going to make things worse in Canada. But you know that we don't need to beat that drum. Yeah, the Canadians are voting today. Hope they might vote for the right guy. Yeah, we both know. We all know that it doesn't matter who the Canadians vote for because they're not going to change the government policy at all. Same thing in the UK. In the US, it's made a difference. In Russia, it's made a difference. But democracy is, in the modern context, democracy is fake. It does not express the will of the people. Everything's manipulated. Everything is falsified to some degree. And both of the candidates in these 2-party systems essentially support the same things. That's why they talk about the uniparty. I've been talking about how there's fundamentally no difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party since 2004. The only thing that's changed is that a lot more people agree with me now. And so that's a good thing that people are beginning to see through the illusion. But just because you know the truth doesn't change what's going to happen on the macro scale. And so it's important to always keep in mind that, regardless of what happens at the macro level, we still have to live our lives. Nothing that, no matter who you vote for, government always wins. I wouldn't say always, but pretty much, It's essentially true. And, we got here where we are because most people fundamentally don't care. Most people don't care what the truth is. They don't care what's actually going on. Most people don't Here's the problem though. Even if you do, there's very little you can do about it yourself. You know, you can make good decisions. You can make smart decisions. You can increase the probability that things will go well for you and your family. And you can pray. But at the end of the day, nothing that you or I do is going to have any effect on whether India goes to war with Pakistan. It's not going to have any effect on when Donald Trump finally decides to stop shipping weapons and money to Ukraine. I mean, frankly, I'm astonished that he's still permitting it. I mean, I don't even really pay much attention anymore to all the rhetoric and that sort of thing because it's so obviously nonsensical and has nothing to do, whatever they talk about has very little to do with what happens. And so when there are big changes, and there will be big changes, the political rhetoric of today and yesterday and 20 years ago is probably going to have very little to do with the outcome. And you know, this is not a pessimistic perspective. This is an observant perspective. You know, it's sometimes disappointing to give up the rhetoric that we grew up with, that we cling to. You know, I'm proud to be an American because at least I know I'm free. To what? Have no control over who lives next door to you? To have no control over the importation of foreigners into your community? You know, how is that freedom? Who voted for that? You know, nobody did. Even the people who support it didn't vote for it. You know, they didn't know it was they didn't know it was in the cards. They didn't know it was an option on the table at the time that those policies were enacted. So, so what I've been doing, and what I alluded to on Social Galactic, I can be a little more specific now. I have been attempting to hunt down pigskin. And my goal is for us to step up our quality with Castalia Library, Castalia History, Castalia Cathedra, to step it up and replace the cowhide with the old school Franklin Library style pigskin. And, you know, I mean, I was going over one of our new books, one of these meditations, the green ones. I think these are green. This might be a black one, but anyhow, let's see. I think it's green. But you know, I was going over this, comparing it to an old Franklin Library, and as nice as it is, I really preferred the finish of the old Franklin one from the 70s. Now, of course, part of it is because it has that great patina of age and that sort of thing, but part of it was definitely the long-lasting quality of the pigskin. And so I managed to find 2 different places that carry some facsimile of it. They were very excited when they found out how many books that we do, and so that went really well. And it looks like, well, my big battery is off, so it looks like we're going to have to call it. This is very effective because the theme was, as you know, the lights went out, and don't worry, the lights have not gone out here. That's just my battery that was fully charged and obviously needs to be replaced. So I leave you on that note. Remember, if you want a copy of Heidi, there are just a handful left. Thanks to everybody who supported this sale. And also, I am going to be streaming more often now. I'm going to try to do a schedule 4 times a week, including Arcaven Nights and possibly a regular weekly stream with Owen. So, I'm Vox Day. This is the Darkstream.